So this is the original house where Dad and Mom and I lived when we first moved to this property. Dad actually literally built it with his own two hands. We didn't have money to drill a well, so we used to collect rainwater off the roof. It was a different roof then, so there was a spout coming out. And we collected the rainwater in this cistern here, and this roof it covers the cistern. It's a corrugated transite roof, and it still is here, and the cistern is still here, although we now have a well and running water, which we didn't have when I was a kid. The original roof was done in concrete tiles, and Dad poured them all himself and laid them all himself. And I guess it was a nearly flat roof. In the mid-'80s, it started leaking so badly. I remember coming in and to visit my parents and wondering why there were pots and pans all over the house, and there were so many leaks that Dad decided to put a new roof on. So now we have a cedar shake roof. It has a scissors truss supporting it, and because I guess he didn't want to rip out the old roof, he just built the new roof over the old roof. There is a detail, I don't know if you want to catch it, at the top of the roof, which is it's getting a little worn out now because the shakes have been up there for quite a while. But in Japanese roofs, there is often this kind of detail at the peak of the roof, and he overlapped the shakes to mimic that way that they do the roofs in Japan. As I said, the roof is getting kind of old and needs to be replaced, so that detail is not as pretty as it was in the beginning, but it is a sort of imitation Japanese detail. Dad worked with Anton and Raymond and closely with the Japanese carpenters when he was in Japan, and probably learned a lot of details from him. He also did a lot of sightseeing with Junzo Yoshimura, and he might have picked up that detail from Junzo. This is very different from when I was growing up in this house. When I was growing up, there was a porch, a 3-foot long porch, I think almost the entire length of the building, and there were all sliding glass doors here. There weren't windows, there were doors that could open to the outside. It was all open and sunny to the south. He made another porch, which he called a moon viewing platform here, and then when he put on the new roof, it seemed to me like he was closing himself in as he got older. This outdoor room here was built in 1958 as an advertisement for Simpson Lumber Company. It's made with redwood, and they figured if they had a nice design where people would have to buy redwood to build it, it would be good advertising. So Dad designed and built this as the prototype. It's cantilevered again. He really loved cantilevered construction. And the posts that hold it up are concrete, and there's a big concrete slab underneath the gravel platform there. And then he built the barbecue. We had to rebuild the barbecue because it was falling apart, but it was basically the same shape and size. And Dad's favorite dish, or the family's favorite dish, was char siu pork. My mother would marinate it, and it would be half pork loins, so that you could skewer one end of it and hang it in the chamber there, and it was like smoking it. It worked very well. It draws very well, and it collects the smoke inside, so it flavors the whatever you hang in there to cook. He planted the ginkgo for sure. I think it was such a beautiful tree this time of year. And my grandfather did most of the planting. My grandfather Nakashima he was one of the founders of the Portland Japanese Garden, and when they came to visit, Grandma would putter around in the kitchen, and Grandpa would putter around outside and plant things. And sometimes he brought them, I think, from the Northwest, and sometimes he ordered them. Anyway, he planted a lot of the probably the flowering cherry trees and a lot of the plants here, thanks to Grandpa. What was in here originally was a wood-burning boiler, which Dad installed, I would say, early 80s, late 70s, because he wanted to be less dependent on fossil fuel. So Kevin would, Kevin's task was to keep loading wood into that furnace there. And after Dad died, he switched over to oil, back to oil. This is the entrance to the house. This was the first stone wall that my father probably ever built with his own two hands. He used available field stone from the property, and I remember as a kid we used to go along in this old car, and sometimes Dad would pull up by the side of the road and say, "That's a really nice rock," and he'd go and put it in the back of the car. So that's how some of these stones got here. But I remember as a kid, I was like 5 years old. He would tell me, he needed a small stone, yay big, to go in that particular place, and go to the stone pile and see if you could find something that would fit. So that was probably my first lesson in stone wall building. Might have been Dad's too, but he had me in helping him, even though I was only 5 years old. And then as time went on, he got bigger and bigger stones. He must have had some help to haul up the big stones. But yeah, while Dad was building this, we were living in a tent back there. So he needed all the help he could get. I think I was excited because we were actually building a house that we would live in. This was our first house. I think we had a rented apartment when we lived in Seattle, and then we were incarcerated and put into the camps on the desert. And then the Raymonds, who were my dad's employers in Japan, had moved from Japan to Pennsylvania and bought a farm down the hill here. And Dad's professor at MIT contacted him and said, "Can you please sponsor the Nakashima so we can get out of camp?" So we were eventually allowed out early to live in Pennsylvania. The Raymond farm was all built of fieldstone like this, and the barn was as well. And so I think Dad absorbed that Pennsylvania farmhouse and farm aesthetic and brought it here and combined it with Japanese detailing and Japanese aesthetic and construction techniques. So I didn't know all that. I was 5 years old. It was just a house. We were going to get our own new house, and I had to help build it, so that was good. When I was little, this room was the house. It was everything. I used, where that cabinet is now, I used to have a little bed, I think, that was right next to the fireplace. My parents had a bed in the main room, and then we had a dining table here, and this was the house. This was all there was. And the beam was imported from a local barn. He needed a big beam, and when he was building the Ben Shawn house, it was a similar situation. He says, "Oh, I found a beam big enough for your house, and we can build now." I mean, that's the way the Japanese carpenters work. They spend years, sometimes decades, assembling the right kind of materials before they actually build a house. And then when they finally find all the materials they need for a house, they can start building. But the materials come first, and you didn't just go out to a lumber yard and order a beam that big, because there weren't any. You had to wait till the right time and the right tree and act accordingly. In most of the buildings, you will find round posts like that. And in Japan, they call them oyabashira, which means mother post, or father post. It actually translates as parent post. The fireplace was built of reinforced concrete. It retained the heat quite well, and that was our only source of heat when we first moved here. When he expanded out to the south, he put in the masonry floor to absorb the sunlight during the day and retain it at night. So that's passive solar storage. He fancied this up. There's some nice flagstone here, and then he added these hand-polished Japanese river stones as a detail along the south. Ben Shawn was one of my father's best friends. He didn't meet him until the 1960s. He had a show in New Hope, but he and Dad became very good friends. He did these lithograph and serigraph prints, and Mom used to keep them, a pile of them, up in the showroom for sale for our clients. And if they decided to buy a bench on print, Dad would make them a frame to go with them. And some of them were so nice they kept them. This was probably a gift from Ben, the Ten Commandments. Here's a piece of bitter brush on the door. This is from the camp on the Idaho desert, which the incarcerees were allowed to collect and do what they wanted with them. So this was particularly beautiful, so Dad kept it. And I think this is Kamakura Bori, and it's lacquer, and I believe this was made by my Aunt Thelma when she was in Japan and studying how to do this and how to make this. Here is a Val Bertoya. He's Harry Bertoya's son. Harry was one of Dad's best friends from the Knoll days in the 1940s, and then his son Val took over his business. And I think Val and Kevin were friends, and maybe that's how that got here.
Did you want to speak about the English oak burl coffee table? The slab was given by Nat Hammer
Oh, it was?
about 1950. Who found it in a lumber yard. It was brought over as ballast on a ship from
Okay.
England.
Uh-huh.
Put off on shore. Someone attempted to burn it, which is why it's so dark.
Oh my goodness.
But due to high content of seawater, it wouldn't burn. It was rescued and put up for sale.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of history in this house. I remember when I was a kid, I used to have friends over, and we would be told that we were to slide around on the floors, on our bottoms, to polish the floor. So that was one of my early jobs, polishing the floor with the seat of my pants. Oh my goodness. Oh. This was the Buck's Cooks. I think there was volume 1 and volume 2. And Dad had a few recipes in here. I think he had sukiyaki, which was his favorite recipe, and shrimp curry, which was another of his specialties. But Mom was mostly, well, I understand, because when you're working, you don't have time to spend a lot of time in the kitchen. But she usually did, simple recipes that didn't take a whole lot of time. And on special occasions, Dad would do his shrimp curry and sukiyaki. That was a special occasion. We didn't have that too often. Most of the time, I remember macaroni and cheese and scalloped potatoes and hot dogs. Their anniversary was on Valentine's Day. They were engaged on Valentine's Day, and they were married on Valentine's Day a year later, and I was born almost exactly a year after that. So usually my birthday got combined with their anniversary party. But the one good thing about their anniversary party was Mom, apparently when they got engaged, they were in Japan, and they'd gone to a special sweet shop, and they'd had strawberry pie, which is pretty rare to get in those days in Japan. And then I guess they had strawberry pie again when they were married, and so their traditional dish on their anniversary was always strawberry pie. It was fresh strawberries with whipped cream on top, and so that was Mom's specialty for Valentine's Day. I remember that. And she also made little. I still have the Jello molds at home, little heart-shaped Jello molds, and she'd make red Jello and with fruit in it or something. That was part of our Valentine's Day celebration too. So they always celebrated holidays with friends over and special dishes. And this window here was, Kevin purchased it when our church, we went to St. Martin's Catholic Church in New Hope, which was in a very small building, which is now the town hall. But when it was a church, they had these in the windows, and when they had to dismantle the church, they took it down some of the stained glass windows, and Kevin purchased one of them. So that's why it's here. Not Nakashima architecture, but part of Nakashima history. These little models of our furniture, this is a lounge chair and a konoi bench with a back, were made again by our associates in Japan, because we certainly wouldn't have had the patience to make them, but they said in order to make those little models, It takes as much time as it does to make an actual piece of furniture, because it's so time consuming to try to get everything to scale and to fit properly. I remember the bathroom was here, but we didn't have a regular bathtub. Um, we had a square wooden bathtub that my dad had made, and there was a tiny little wood coal stove, which heated the water by convection. And we would only have a bath once a week. And it would get really hot, and I remember that was a big treat that we got that hot bath once a week. This used to be my room when I was a kid growing up. Before Kevin came along, this was my room. I remember painting the walls. I mean, the sliding doors on my closet there. I think I was between the ages of 10 and 14 or something. It's done in two different phases. So I guess that was the way I imagined life should be, or the property. And in the upper right-hand corner, there's a picture of the old Thunderbird. That was, I remember we went to the car dealership because we needed a new car, and Kevin was like 3 or 4 at the time, and he looked at the Thunderbird and said, "I like that." And so Dad got it for him. I grew up with this car with holes in the floor that my shoes kept falling through. Kevin got a brand new T-Bird. I remember sleeping here and looking at the wall. Of course, the wall didn't have as much stuff on it as it does now, but it's all natural wood, and there were so many different patterns in the wood. I used to marvel at all the different shapes and try to And when I was little, my parents had this ritual. They would read me stories every night. I mean, their bedroom was right next door, and I was the only child, so they would take turns and they would read me stories. And my mother would tell me stories that she made up, and Dad would read me stories, and that was part of the ritual of being in this room. This was my parents' bedroom. There's a bench on lithograph on that wall, and 2 sketches by William A. Smith, one of my grandmother and one of my grandfather. William A. Smith was also a dear friend of my parents. So the doors are covered with paper. It's called fusuma, and they had gotten kind of beat up over the years, so we did have these redone. But it's the same pattern. We were able to find the same pattern. These are Dad's. This is Dad's old overcoat.
Yeah. And then if you open the floor closet, you'll see a lot of your mom's.
Lots of history still. Yeah, Mom used to wear these dresses to parties.
Yeah. I remember some of the museum openings.
Yeah. She made them all herself. Dad would, when they went traveling, they would often buy fabrics and bring them back, and then Mother would have patterns that she made herself clothing with, and Dad would work on them a little bit. And I remember Mom made that dress, and this is a beautiful silk dress that she made. But they're all fabrics that they collected in India or Japan, and they came back and Mother made. Oh, this is a beautiful one. I think this is in my book. It's the Asanoha pattern. It's kasuri. It's all hand. The pattern is woven in to the fabric. Mom made herself a dress out of it. Well, my brother Kevin was born in 1954. First when he was a baby, he slept in my parents' room, I think, and then when he got bigger, he needed his own bedroom, so he took over my bedroom, and Dad built me this one, which was really nice. I remember studying in that desk right there, looking out the window. And the screen was made in Japan to fit that window, so that was a nice touch. The bed used to be over there and in that corner, and it used to have a trundle, so I used to have friends come over and they would sleep in the trundle, or I would sleep in the trundle. We have this original Ben Shahn hand hanging on the wall. This is one of the few original drawings of Ben Shahn, and this particular hand wasn't particularly Dad's hand, but it looked a lot like Dad's hand, and it became my father's logo when they did their shows in Japan. There are some Bernarda Shahns. This one is obviously a flower, sort of fading flower by Bernarda, and the one up there is a warrior. I think she was a book illustrator more than a artist who sold her own work. I mean, she lived in Ben's shadow for most of her life.
We have a nice collection of her books right there.
Do you remember which book that one's from?
I don't, but
Yeah.
we have at least 10 of her books there.
Oh, Kevin was a fan of Bernarda. Oh, and this lighting fixture here, Dad's best friend from University of Washington, and before, I think they were friends in high school, was Stanley Brogren. And he said they lived on neighboring hills in Seattle, and they used to have rock fights. They used to try to pitch rocks at each other, but they also went to the University of Washington in architecture. And Nita Brogren was Stanley Brogren's wife, and she was one of the early women, one of the few early women who actually studied architecture, but she made that lighting fixture herself. And she was a really good seamstress. She designed clothes and made them, and she made me several outfits when I was growing up. But she made these lamps, which are quite nice, from bamboo and paper.